People always say betrayal arrives in silence, but mine buzzed into my life with a notification sound. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in Portland, and I had just signed my 4-year-old son Miles out of daycare. My phone pinged, and I glanced at the screen, expecting a casual text from my husband about dinner plans. Instead, I read the message that would collapse everything I thought was secure. Moving to Madrid with Hannah. I've transferred the funds to my private account. Good luck paying rent. My hand froze mid-signature. Miles tugged at my coat, completely unaware our entire world had just been set on fire. "Mommy, did you bring the animal crackers today?" I blinked, forcing a smile. "Of course, sweetheart." I walked him to the car in a daze, my mind spinning. Hannah was Ethan's administrative assistant, and the funds he referred to were our life savings, 8 years of sacrifice and planning. When Miles asked if Daddy was making spaghetti tonight, I replied gently, "Daddy's on a trip," adding quickly, "We'll have pizza instead." My lips moved automatically, but my brain couldn't catch up. That night, I waited until Miles was glued to his favorite cartoon before calling the bank. A polite representative confirmed my worst fear. Ethan had transferred all $42,000 from our joint savings to an account solely under his name. The bank couldn't help. Because our names were both on the account, it wasn't legally theft. I logged into our checking. $347.12 stared back at me. Our rent was $2,000. Due in 4 days. I was numb. Until my phone rang again. Ethan's mother, Margot. "Clara, what have you done?" she barked. "Ethan says you're refusing to let him speak to Miles unless he pays more alimony." Choked on air. "Margot, Ethan left. He's in Spain. He took everything." "Don't lie," she snapped. "He showed me your messages. You're threatening him." The blood drained from my face. Ethan wasn't just escaping. He was rewriting the story, turning me into the villain. That night, I sat in our dimly lit apartment, the sounds of Miles's cartoons blending with the storm outside. I stared at the floor, a battlefield of scattered paperwork and panic. Ethan had stolen more than money. He stole stability, trust. My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 37, freelance editor, a mother, and as of this morning, the soon-to-be ex-wife of a man who blindsided us with a kind of cold, calculated cruelty I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't lived it. I remembered how it all started. Ethan and I met at a publishing seminar in Seattle 9 years ago. He was charming, magnetic, and relentless in pursuit. We married within 6 months. He always said he wanted a partner, someone with ambition. But when Miles was born and I stepped back to freelance from home, the dynamic shifted. Suddenly I was the dependent, the burden. And Margot, who never approved of me, made sure I knew it. "Clara is too soft with him," she would whisper, even while Ethan stayed silent. 2 years ago, we sold our modest house and moved into a rental. Ethan said we should use the equity to invest in a friend's startup. The company collapsed, but I believed his explanations about market shifts. When I suggested going back to full-time work, he smiled and said, "I've got it under control. Miles needs you at home." I wanted to trust him. I did trust him, until small things started to add up. Late nights, defensive replies, a Barcelona travel guide tucked into his drawer. He said it was just research. But now I knew. This wasn't an impulsive move. It was a blueprint. While I was making preschool snack lists and planning summer activities, Ethan was planning an escape. As the apartment quieted, I opened my laptop and typed the only response I could manage. "Thanks for the update." 3 words. Simple. Cold. But beneath them boiled a fury I could barely contain. I didn't cry that night. Not yet. I made a list. Number 1, keep a roof over Miles's head. Number 2, find a lawyer. Number 3, find out exactly how deep Ethan's betrayal ran. Because something told me this wasn't the worst of it. Not yet. The next morning, I stood in front of Ethan's office building with a breath trapped in my throat. It was a sleek glass tower downtown, the kind of place that made you walk faster just to look like you belonged. I didn't. Not today. I hadn't slept. My eyes were red. My coat was wrinkled. And I had no appointment. But I had questions and I needed answers. The receptionist greeted me with a professional smile that faltered the moment I asked for Ethan Blake. "I'm sorry he no longer works here," she said gently, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I blinked. "That's not possible. He was here Monday." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but he resigned last week. His last day was yesterday." It felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Last week, while I was making grocery lists and checking Miles's backpack for field trip forms, Ethan had been staging his final exit. The receptionist avoided my eyes. "I'm really sorry." I nodded, backed away, and stepped into the elevator with my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I wasn't sure what was worse, that he'd left us or that he'd been so meticulously thorough. Outside, I sat in my car and dialed Caleb Morris, Ethan's closest friend, the one who used to barbecue with us and tell dumb jokes to make Miles laugh. "Hey, Clara," he answered, his voice cautious. "How are you holding up?" "You knew," I said. Silence. Then a sigh. "He made me promise. Said he needed a clean break. That it was better for everyone. Better for everyone." He abandoned his child. Caleb's voice softened. "Look, I told him it was wrong. But he said Hannah made him happy. Said he didn't want to keep dragging you down." Hannah. So it was true. The woman who color-coded his calendar had become his escape plan. "Did he tell you about the money?" Yes. Caleb hesitated. "No. Had no idea." That's messed up." I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. My fingers shook as I gripped the steering wheel. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a slow-burn scheme. And I had been blind to it. When I got home, a thick envelope was waiting on the doormat. Inside was a divorce petition, dated a full week before the text message. Ethan was already living in Spain. The document requested sole custody awarded to me, with no visitation rights for the father. Sounded generous. Until I read the attached letter from his lawyer. "Mr. Blake has reason to believe Mrs. Bennett possesses sufficient assets to support herself and their child. Therefore, no spousal or child support will be provided." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. He had taken everything, and now he was pretending I had enough to get by. My jaw clenched. My thoughts were a whirl of rage, disbelief, and fear. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message. From Ethan. Landed in Madrid. "Don't contact me. My lawyer will handle everything." No apology. No explanation. Just closure his way. I opened our filing cabinet and began pulling every document that might help me build a case. Tax returns, insurance files, old contracts. I needed proof. Somewhere beneath the paper clutter and shattered dreams, I found an envelope tucked under a stack of appliance manuals. It was addressed to Margot. Opened it. Inside was a birthday card and a handwritten note. "Mom, thanks for helping with the Madrid apartment deposit. Hannah and I can't wait to show you our new place when you visit in May. Couldn't have done it without your support. Love, Ethan." 3 months ago. That's when this began. Before he ever mentioned an overseas promotion. Before I found the Barcelona guidebook. Margot had known. She hadn't just condoned this, she'd bankrolled it. My hands trembled as I took photos of the note. Margot's voice echoed in my head. "He showed me your threats." The threats she helped manufacture. Later that evening, I booted up our old shared laptop. On instinct, I opened Ethan's email. He had once left his password written on a sticky note, and he was never good at updating them. I tried it. It worked. My stomach turned. In his drafts folder, I found an unsent email to Hannah, with a resume attached. The document listed his new position at Meridian Global Madrid, starting 2 days after he had sent me that heartless text. He had lined everything up, a job, a home, a new life, and cut me out like a bad chapter in his story. The next morning, I took the documents to my lawyer, Nina Alvarez. She wore a navy suit and a look of no-nonsense efficiency. What your husband did is manipulative, she said after scanning the paperwork. Not illegal, but not going to win him any favors in court. She tapped the resume. This changes things. If we can prove he's working, we can file for emergency support and asset freezes. We need more. I'll get more, I said, my voice low and firm. Whatever it takes. Because this wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This was about Miles. About protecting him from a man who had proven he cared more about a new address than his own son. I had been underestimated. But that was about to change. 2 days after uncovering Ethan's new job documents, I was seated across from Nina again. Her office smelled faintly of citrus and ink, a strange comfort in the storm my life had become. We'll file for emergency orders, she said, tapping her pen. Child support, temporary custody confirmation, and a freeze on any marital assets we can trace. But to really make it stick, we need evidence of intent, proof he deliberately tried to avoid financial responsibility. I handed her the envelope from Margot and the printout of the resume draft. There's more, I said. He didn't just leave. He orchestrated this. And his mother helped. Nina's eyes scanned the birthday card, her lips tightening. This is good. Very good. But it gets better if we can find out where the money went. That night I returned to the laptop. Ethan had always been careless in a specific way. Smart enough to plan, arrogant enough to believe I'd never catch on. I tried one of his common passwords on his cloud storage. First attempt failed. Second attempt success. Inside were folders meticulously labeled. Bain move. Finances. Custody notes. The last one stopped my heart. I opened the document titled, Custody Strategy. It was a blueprint, a cold plan for how to gain full custody of Miles once Ethan was established in Madrid. Leverage Clara's postpartum depression, it read. Paint her as emotionally unstable, unable to manage full-time parenting. My breath caught. That dark period, when I had struggled silently after giving birth, the pain I thought we had survived together, had become ammunition. The next file was worse. Offshore transfers. Screenshots of wire confirmations, emails with Margot, and bank statements pointing to an account in the Cayman Islands. Over $200,000, split into multiple deposits. I forwarded everything to Nina, my fingers shaking. Minutes later she called. This is it, Clara. This is what we needed. Her voice was alive with urgency. We'll file to freeze the account immediately and request an international hold on the assets. The next day, an emergency hearing was granted. But just hours before it, I received a message from an unknown number. Clara, my name is Lena. I used to live with Hannah. I found your number in one of her old notebooks. I think you deserve to know what they've been planning. I met Lena at a quiet corner cafe, paranoid with every glance behind me. She was young, jittery, and clearly wrestling with guilt. Hannah talked about it all the time, she said. How they were going to start fresh in Spain. No baggage. No ties. She joked that once they were settled, they'd erase the past, completely. I asked if she knew about the money. Lena nodded. She said Ethan had a system, offshore accounts, hidden backups, that even his mom didn't know the full extent. Her last words hit me like a freight train. They were betting on you giving up, making it so expensive and draining to fight back, you'd just disappear. When I left the cafe, my face was frozen in a kind of practiced calm, but inside I was roaring. The hearing that afternoon was quick but powerful. Nina presented the timeline, the bank records, the offshore account evidence, and most damning, the custody strategy document. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, reviewed it all in silence before issuing a temporary freeze on the identified accounts and granting me full temporary custody of Miles. Felt like progress. Until that night. A message popped up from Ethan's lawyer. We're offering $5,000 as a full and final settlement of all marital claims. Accepting this offer will close the case permanently. I stared at the screen, stunned by the audacity. They're testing your desperation, Nina said when I showed her the message. They're counting on you being too tired to keep going. Later that night, a direct message from Ethan arrived. Take the deal, Clara. You won't get more. Don't be foolish. Be reasonable for once. His condescension was gasoline on my already burning resolve. Then came a twist I never expected. Ethan called me. For the first time since his vanishing act. His name flashed on my screen. I answered, heart racing. You vindictive witch, he hissed before I could speak. You got me fired. I didn't, I said quietly. Your mother did. She impersonated me, sent fake emails to your company using my name. Silence. You're lying. Look at the email metadata. Look at the files she sent. You know what was in my apartment. She was the only one who visited. There was a pause. I could hear his shallow breathing. I'll call you back, he said finally. 10 minutes later, my inbox lit up with a thread of screenshots. Text messages between Ethan and Margot. My hands shook as I scrolled. 3 months ago she had written, once you're in Spain, we'll file for full custody. With Clara's depression history, it'll be easy. We'll make her look like a risk. I closed my eyes, waves of nausea rolling through me. My postpartum struggle had been twisted into a weapon. Margot hadn't just been complicit. She was the architect of this entire scheme. By morning, Nina and I had filed new motions, not just to freeze assets, but to expose Margot's identity fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy to manipulate custody. And yet, something still lingered at the edge of it all, something that felt unfinished. There was more. I could feel it. The surface was cracking, and someone else, someone close, was about to flip everything again. The call came just after sunrise. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, waking me from a restless sleep. I expected another bank notification or a message from Nina. Instead, I saw the name, Hannah Rivers. I stared for a full 5 seconds before answering. Clara. Her voice was barely above a whisper, stripped of its usual confidence. We need to talk. I sat up slowly. Why are you calling me? I think Ethan is spiraling, she said. He's talking about flying back to the US tomorrow. Says he's going to fix everything. I'm scared, Clara. I don't know what he means, but he's not stable. I didn't respond. My mind raced through every scenario. Was he coming to intimidate me? Take Miles. Start another smear campaign. You're scared now, finally said. After helping him drain our accounts and lie to his own child. I didn't know the full extent. I swear. Her voice cracked. He told me you were emotionally unstable, that he had no choice. I believed him. Until he started hiding money from me too. I blinked. He's hiding money from you. She hesitated. Yes. After the Cayman account got frozen, he told me we'd be fine. Said there's another account. One even Margot doesn't know about. He's been transferring funds into it since last year. I just found a statement on his tablet. My mouth went dry. This was the break we needed. A hidden reserve Ethan thought was invisible. Where is it? Liechtenstein. Small private bank. I took a photo of the statement. There was a pause. I'll send it to you. If you can make me a promise. I should have known. Nothing came free in this war. What do you want? Protection, she said quickly. I'll give you everything. Bank names, transfers, Ethan's emails to his mom, all of it. But when this goes to court, I don't want to go down with them. I didn't sign up for identity theft and custody plots. I just wanted a new start. I hated the idea of giving her immunity. But I also knew how badly we needed her testimony. After consulting Nina, we drafted a limited immunity proposal. If Hannah cooperated fully and submitted a sworn statement, we wouldn't pursue charges against her. Nina would present her only as a corroborating witness, not a co-conspirator. Hannah agreed instantly. Within the hour, she emailed a trove of files, including the Liechtenstein account, showing a balance of over $200,000. She also shared screenshots of messages between Ethan and Margot, discussing how to structure the custody case so that I would look unhinged and financially dependent. One message, dated a week before Ethan's departure, read, "Once we establish permanent residency here, we'll push for full custody. Clara won't be able to afford to fight." We used this final piece to file for an emergency restraining order, and it was granted just hours before Ethan's flight was set to arrive in Portland. Airport security was notified. The moment his passport was scanned, he would be served and held. I waited anxiously, watching the clock tick toward landing time. When the call finally came, it was from airport authorities. "Mrs. Bennett, we've located and served Mr. Blake. He's being held for processing." He was not cooperative. That didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me was the phone call I received an hour later. "Ethan." His voice seethed with fury. "What the hell is this, Clara? I came back to work things out. With a one-way ticket and no hotel booked." I replied, "Did you think I wouldn't know? Jackie told me everything." There was silence. "I mean Hannah," I added slowly. "She gave me the bank statements, the messages, the whole plan." "You're bluffing," he snapped, but I could hear the doubt creeping in. "She'd never." "She did," I interrupted. "She knows you were lying to her too." Ethan exhaled sharply. "You don't know what you're doing. You're ruining everything." "No," I said calmly. "You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess." The following morning we entered the courtroom. Ethan stood beside a local attorney he must have hired overnight, looking sleep-deprived and cornered. His usual charm was gone. The judge's bench loomed high and impassive. Nina presented our case with chilling precision: the offshore accounts, the custody strategy, the attempt to make me look unstable, the identity fraud orchestrated by Margot, and now, thanks to Hannah, the existence of a secondary hidden account in Europe. But the most damning moment came when Hannah's statement was read aloud. In his own words, Nina said, Mr. Blake described his wife as a legal liability. He plotted to discredit her, to deny her support, and to use the child they share as leverage. The courtroom was dead silent. Ethan's attorney stammered a defense, claiming Clara had fabricated evidence. But the paper trail was undeniable. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. "I've reviewed the evidence," she said. "This is not just a financial dispute. It is a calculated betrayal of family responsibilities. Mr. Blake, your actions demonstrate a dangerous willingness to deceive and destabilize your child's life." Ethan's face turned pale. He had no rebuttal. The ruling was swift. All identified funds, including those in Liechtenstein, were frozen and brought under court supervision. Ethan's passport was confiscated. I was granted full custody of Miles, with Ethan allowed only supervised visitation pending psychological review. A forensic accountant would be assigned to trace every cent he had moved. But the damage to Ethan's reputation was already done. The court records were public. His lies were now part of the official record. And I, the woman he once dismissed with a text, had just dismantled his entire house of cards. Still, one question lingered. Margot had vanished since the last filing. She hadn't responded to court summons. And something told me her final move was still to come. 3 days after the courtroom victory, my apartment door buzzed at dusk. I wasn't expecting anyone. Miles was building a Lego tower in the living room, humming a soft tune. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, approached the intercom and asked, "Yes, it's Margot Blake. I'd like to speak to you." My blood chilled. For a long moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. But part of me knew this confrontation was inevitable. I pressed the button to unlock the building door and waited. When I opened the apartment door, she was already standing there. She looked different. Still elegant in her tailored coat and pearls, but thinner, paler. Her sharp cheekbones were more pronounced, her usual superiority replaced with a guarded weariness. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside wordlessly and closed the door behind her. Miles peeked around the corner, then returned to his toys. I led Margot to the kitchen table, where she sat slowly, like she was afraid the chair might betray her too. "I didn't come to argue," she said, eyes fixed on the wooden grain of the table. "I came to explain." I sat across from her, arms crossed. "Explain what?" "The offshore accounts. The custody plot. The email impersonation." She flinched. "I didn't know Ethan kept everything. I didn't know about the backups, the second account. I knew about Madrid, yes. I helped with the deposit. But I never imagined." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought you'd fall apart, Clara. I truly did. But you didn't. You stood up." I narrowed my gaze. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I was wrong," she murmured. "About you. About what Ethan needed. I wanted to believe my son was still the boy who used to charm every room, who made honor roll, who took care of me when his father died. But he's not that boy anymore." Her voice softened into something more raw. "He became someone else. Entitled. Ruthless. And I encouraged it because I wanted to protect him, even when he didn't deserve it." I remained silent. It was the first time I'd ever seen Margot as anything other than a cold statue of judgment. "I never meant to destroy your life," she continued. "But I was complicit. I sent the email to Madrid. I thought it would push you into settling. I never imagined he'd lose the job. I just wanted him to come home and face what he'd done." "You impersonated me," I said, my voice flat. "You made it look like I was the unstable one." She nodded once, shame finally seeping through her perfect posture. "You have every right to press charges. And maybe you should. What do you want, Margot?" asked. She reached into her purse and placed a small USB drive on the table. "There's a third account. In Singapore. I only found out about it 2 days ago when his financial advisor called my house by mistake. He was trying to reach Ethan." I stared at the drive. "Why give this to me?" "Because you were the only one who told the truth," she whispered. "And because Miles deserves better than the mess we've all made." A long silence stretched between us. Finally she stood. "I've given a sworn affidavit to your attorney. I won't fight the court. I'm leaving Portland. For good." She opened the door and turned back one last time. "You won, Clara. But more than that. You survived him. I hope someday that feels like enough." And then she was gone. That night I handed the USB to Nina. Inside were records of over $90,000. Money Ethan had quietly shifted out over the past 6 months. Hidden away like insurance against every possible outcome. "This will be the final nail," Nina said. "We'll freeze this too. And request criminal charges formally." In the following days, Ethan's legal foundation crumbled. With the addition of Margot's affidavit and the Singapore account files, the judge reopened the custody case for final ruling. The evidence of deception was now indisputable, even in international eyes. On the morning of the final hearing, Ethan didn't show. His attorney arrived alone, face drawn, holding a short letter. "Mr. Blake has voluntarily forfeited all custody rights and claims to shared assets," he read. "He will not contest the charges. He is returning to Spain indefinitely." There was no fight, no defense, only quiet defeat. Outside the courtroom, Nina placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's done." But as I looked around, I knew something even more important had been restored. Not just my financial security, not just legal justice, but my voice. My story. No longer filtered through someone else's lies. That night, as I tucked Miles into bed, he looked up and asked, "Mommy, are we safe now?" I pulled the blanket up to his chin and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. We're safe." And for the first time in months, I knew it was true. 2 weeks after the final hearing, I stood in the doorway of a modest second-floor condo in northeast Portland. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Clean walls, a working heater, a window that faced the sunrise. I let the sunlight pour in, bathing the empty living room in gold. Miles ran circles on the hardwood floor, dragging a toy dinosaur behind him. "This one has more zoom space," he cheered. I watched him with a smile that felt foreign on my face. Not because it didn't belong, but because it had been missing for too long. The funds recovered from Ethan's frozen accounts had been released under court supervision. Between the money in Cayman, Liechtenstein, and Singapore, over $400,000 were retrieved. Nina had handled everything with surgical precision. We paid off debts, moved out of our cramped apartment, and bought a small place under my name alone. But more than the money, it was the autonomy that mattered. I enrolled Miles in a new preschool with a flexible schedule. His teachers were warm, patient, and he took to the new environment quickly. I found a part-time editing position at a publishing firm that allowed remote hours. It wasn't glamorous, but it was consistent. I was slowly piecing together a new rhythm, one that didn't depend on someone else's promises. Still, the public fallout from Ethan's case rippled like aftershocks. News of the court proceedings had quietly spread through Portland's tight-knit publishing and marketing circles. His resignation from Meridian Global, the custody plot, and the identity fraud committed by his own mother. It had all become part of an uncomfortable whisper network. One day, while picking up Miles, another mom stopped me in the parking lot. "You're Clara, right?" she asked, her tone gentle. "Yes," I said cautiously. She hesitated, then smiled. "I just wanted to say, I think you're incredibly brave. What you went through. What you did for your son. It's inspiring." I thanked her, my voice tight with surprise. I didn't think anyone would see me as anything but the woman whose life had exploded. But somehow I'd become something else, a symbol of quiet resilience. Yet even in victory, there were reminders of the cost. One afternoon, I received a thick envelope in the mail. A letter from Ethan. Inside was a 3-page apology, handwritten, his scrawl uneven. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't offer excuses. He simply acknowledged the harm, the lies, and the pain. "I thought starting over meant disappearing," he wrote. "I didn't understand that what I was really doing was destroying everything good I had left. Especially you. Especially Miles." I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I folded the letter and locked it away in a drawer. Later that week, Nina called to inform me the district attorney had decided to formally pursue criminal charges against Margot for identity fraud. I gave a brief statement to the prosecutor, reaffirming what she had done. I didn't feel vindictive, only resolute. People had to face consequences for actions that endangered others, especially children. Margot never contacted me again. And Ethan, he disappeared from the public eye. Rumors suggested he remained in Madrid, unemployed, possibly under investigation for international financial misconduct. But I didn't chase those threads. I had no reason to. Because every morning now, I woke to a home that felt like mine. I cooked breakfast with Miles in the kitchen, his chatter filling the silence that once suffocated me. We painted the living room walls a soft green. We named our potted plants. We made bedtime stories up from scratch. One evening, as we watched rain tap against the windows, Miles leaned against me and asked, "Mommy, do people always go away?" I wrapped my arms around him gently. "Not everyone. And not always. Some people stay, even when things are hard." He nodded and yawned. "Like us." "Exactly," I whispered. Because through every betrayal, every lie, every legal motion and sleepless night, the one truth that anchored me was this: I stayed. I fought. I refused to disappear. And now we were building something no one could steal. Not with text. Not with lies. Not even with silence. It was a Monday morning when the envelope arrived, cream-colored, thick, and bearing the unmistakable logo of Horizon Books. My former employer. The one I left behind 5 years ago when Miles was born, trading a senior editorial title for motherhood, freelance gigs, and Ethan's promises of stability. I hadn't heard from them in years. I opened the envelope slowly, expecting a generic alumni update or perhaps a tax form from long-ago benefits. But it wasn't that. It was a letter from the current managing editor, someone I didn't know. Her name was Adeline Porter, and she wrote with surprising warmth. "Clara," it began, Your name came up during our internal restructure review. I went digging through our archives and found several of your past editorial projects. And to be honest, I was stunned by the quality and precision you brought to every manuscript. I also came across recent news coverage of your legal case. I just wanted to say, you handled it with strength and grace. My hands trembled slightly as I read on. If you're open to it, I'd like to speak with you about a new role. Remote, flexible senior editor overseeing international fiction acquisitions. You'd have control over your schedule and full benefits included. We believe your voice deserves a home again. I placed the letter on the table and sat back in stunned silence. After everything, the losses, the humiliation, the fight to be heard, my career was quietly waiting for me, patient and unjudging. I thought of all the late nights I had edited manuscripts between bottle feedings and Miles's fevers. All the times I doubted if I could return to that world. If I had anything left to offer it. And here it was, not just offering me a seat again but a position of leadership. On my terms. Called Nina first. That's not just a job offer, she said after reading the scanned letter. That's a door. Very big one. And you earned the key. Later that night, I sat with Miles under our newly strung fairy lights in the living room. He was drawing a picture of the two of us standing on what looked like a boat made of stars. What's this? Asked smiling. It's us, he said simply. Going somewhere far but safe. I kissed the top of his head and stared at the image. It felt like a metaphor I hadn't known I needed. The next day I met with Adeline over a video call. She was composed, witty, and well-informed. She didn't shy away from acknowledging the media coverage surrounding Ethan's trial, but treated it with the respect of a fellow woman who understood public scandal and personal dignity could coexist. We value editors who don't just know story structure, she said. We value editors who understand conflict, who know what it takes to rewrite something broken. That was the moment I said yes. The position started the following week. My new colleagues welcomed me back with a quiet reverence, as if I were a survivor returning from war. I managed my projects from home, with Miles playing nearby, occasionally asking to help Mommy fix words. As the weeks passed, my days regained shape. My nights brought rest instead of restless planning. And the fear that used to live under my skin like a second heart began to loosen its grip. Ethan never resurfaced. Margot's case progressed slowly through the courts, but I remained at a distance, focusing on what was ahead rather than what had been left behind. One afternoon, I found myself editing a novel about a woman who had been betrayed by everyone she trusted, only to find her strength not in revenge, but in starting again. Wiser, tougher, kinder to herself. I paused and stared at the page. Sometimes stories aren't just written, they're lived. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to rewrite your own. Not because someone else gives you permission, but because you finally decide you're the one holding the pen. The email arrived on a rainy Thursday evening, tucked between invoices and preschool reminders. It was from a woman named Celeste Grant, the founder of a national nonprofit supporting women navigating high-conflict divorces and custody battles. I recognized the organization immediately. I had read their blog entries in the early days of Ethan's disappearance, desperate for validation, for someone else's story that mirrored my own. Now Celeste was reaching out to me. Clara, the email began, your story has made its way to us. Not through gossip but through admiration. One of our members attended your custody hearing in Portland as a legal intern and spoke of how you handled yourself. Your evidence, your calm, your refusal to be silenced. We're hosting our annual symposium next month in Seattle, and we'd be honored if you would consider being our closing speaker. I stared at the screen for a long time. Me, a speaker. I had barely survived that storm, and now someone thought I could stand in front of a crowd and recount it. I forwarded the email to Nina. You should do it, she replied immediately. Not because they need you, but because someone in that audience might be sitting where you were a year ago. And they need to know what survival looks like. That night, I stayed awake long after putting Miles to bed, replaying every detail of that first message from Ethan. The sinking in my stomach. The numbness. The way my name had been twisted by those who claimed to love me. This wasn't just about telling my story. It was about reclaiming my voice, not just in court documents or affidavits, but in front of people who might carry the same invisible bruises. Accepted. The weeks passed quickly. I prepared my speech during lunch breaks, late nights, and quiet afternoons while Miles napped. I practiced in the mirror, in the car, once even while standing in line at the grocery store. When the day arrived, I stood backstage in a conference center ballroom filled with 300 women. Some wore power suits, others clutched notebooks with shaking fingers. All of them carried stories. Celeste introduced me with grace and warmth, then handed me the microphone. The lights dimmed, and I began. I didn't think my story was remarkable when it began. I thought it was ordinary. A husband leaving, a woman trying to hold things together. But what I didn't realize was that the most dangerous thing wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the silence that followed. The way people assumed I must have done something to deserve it. The way institutions shrugged because technically, nothing illegal had happened, yet. I paused, scanned the crowd. I want to tell you what happened. But more than that, I want to tell you what I learned. About resilience, about fighting with paper cuts instead of fists, and about how sometimes the person you become on the other side of devastation is someone you never thought you'd have the strength to meet. I spoke for 30 minutes. I told the truth. About Ethan. About Margot. About the lawyer's letters and the joint accounts and the quiet rage of being called unfit by the people who once praised my motherhood. And when I finished, the silence that followed wasn't judgment. It was reverence. Then applause. Slow at first, then thunderous. Women lined up to speak with me afterward. Some with tears, others with trembling hands clutching their own custody documents. Some with soft smiles and steady eyes that said, "Me too." One woman in her 60s pulled me aside. "My daughter went through something similar," she said. "But she didn't fight back. She didn't think she could. I'm going to send her your speech. I want her to see what it looks like when a woman refuses to be erased." In that moment I realized something powerful. Ethan had tried to vanish me from the story. But by standing on that stage, by speaking, by choosing not just to rebuild but to help others rise, I had written myself back in. That night, as Miles fell asleep beside me in the hotel room, his tiny hand curled around mine, I looked out the window at the Seattle skyline glowing softly in the mist. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming. And the story wasn't over yet. 3 months after the symposium, I received an unexpected call from the Multnomah County Courthouse. At first, I thought it was a clerical follow-up, maybe a form that had been missed or a routine review of the frozen asset disbursements. But it wasn't that. The voice on the line belonged to Judge Madeline Hoyt, the very woman who had presided over my emergency custody hearing. Her tone was calm, authoritative, and unexpectedly warm. "Ms. Bennett," she said, "we're piloting a new initiative, a legal support program for high-conflict family law cases. We're looking for civilian advisors to help train our intake officers, clerks, and paralegals on the lived experience of litigants. Survivors who've gone through the system and can offer insight. Your name was recommended by one of our clerks. And your court testimony left an impression." I sat still, processing. "You want me to consult for the courthouse?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "Only a few hours a week. Nothing formal. But we believe your voice could help us shape policies, ones that better serve women in crisis, especially those who don't know how to ask for help yet." 1,000 emotions moved through me in that moment. Humility, pride, and something more painful, more complicated. The memory of standing in that very courthouse, drowning in fear, gripping Nina's sleeve like a lifeline. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course. But I hope you'll say yes." When I ended the call, I sat in silence. This was more than a job. It was a bridge. A chance to reach across the chasm I had once stood on the edge of and say, "Here, take my hand." I walked to the window and looked outside. The trees were starting to turn, early autumn burning the tips of the leaves gold and rust. Miles was playing with sidewalk chalk on the front path, drawing what appeared to be a purple rocket ship with tiny stars around it. The door to the courthouse wasn't the only thing opening. There was another one inside me. A door I thought I'd slammed shut forever the day Ethan vanished with our money, our future, our peace. But now it was creaking open. Later that evening I called Celeste Grant from the nonprofit. "I think I might take the courthouse offer," I said. "Is that insane?" "Not at all," she said gently. "It's brave. And it's needed. But what if it's too much?" I admitted. "What if standing that close to the system again brings it all back?" Celeste's pause was short, but meaningful. "Then maybe that's the point," she replied. "To bring it back and make sure it never happens again." The following week, I walked into the courthouse not as a defendant, not as a pleading mother, but as a voice the system had asked to hear. I sat through meetings with staffers, reviewed outdated forms that assumed equal financial power between spouses, helped rewrite intake scripts for domestic abandonment cases, even reviewed language used in restraining order filings to remove bias against female petitioners. At one point, a junior clerk asked me, "How do you know so much about this?" I looked up from the draft and said simply, "Because I lived it." Every hour I spent there felt like reclaiming a tiny piece of the story Ethan had tried to strip from me. Not just for myself, but for every woman who would come after. One afternoon, I passed by the courtroom where I had first stood shaking, holding Nina's folder like a shield. It was empty now, quiet. But I paused and let the memory rise. And for the first time I didn't feel the panic or shame. Felt power. When I returned home, Miles ran to the door and shouted, "Did you win, Mommy?" I laughed, scooping him into my arms. "I think so," I said. "I think we both did." That night, as I tucked him in, he asked, "Can we go on a rocket ship tomorrow?" "Maybe not tomorrow," I said. "But someday. I think we could build one ourselves." Because in a world where I'd once been silenced, I had found a way to speak. In courtrooms, at podiums, and now, inside the very halls that had once seen me at my weakest. And every time I spoke I was telling the world, we are not invisible. We are not done. And we are not going anywhere. It had been almost a year to the day since Ethan sent that message. The digital dagger that sliced our world in half. And now, I stood on the balcony of our condo, watching Miles race around the small garden below with a paper crown on his head and a plastic sword in his hand. He had just turned 5. There were cupcakes with blue frosting, laughter from his new classmates, and the kind of joy that seemed to stitch invisible threads into the air. I had decorated the apartment with streamers the night before, each taped corner a quiet declaration that we were still here, still moving forward. After the party, as the sky turned lavender, I found myself alone in the kitchen, rinsing out juice boxes and tossing crumpled napkins. That's when I saw the envelope. No return address. I opened it, expecting perhaps a birthday card or a stray parent RSVP. But inside was a letter. From Ethan. He had written it by hand, the familiar slant of his penmanship instantly recognizable. "Clara, I know I have no right to write you, but I need to say something. Not for sympathy, not for redemption. I've forfeited both. But because there's one thing left I owe you. The truth. Asterisk asterisk. I thought I was escaping. I told myself lies about freedom, about starting over, about Hannah, about you. But the real truth is I ran from the guilt of being less than you deserved. And I destroyed everything in the process. Asterisk asterisk. I see pictures of Miles sometimes. My mother sends them. He's growing. I don't expect to be part of that. But I hope somehow he knows I didn't leave because of him. I left because I couldn't face who I had become. Asterisk asterisk. I'm sorry I took your trust and treated it like currency. I'm sorry I weaponized your strength. I'm sorry for everything. Asterisk asterisk. Don't write back. I won't send another letter. I just wanted you to have this. Not to change your mind, but to give you one final piece of closure I should have offered long ago. Asterisk asterisk. Take care of him. You were always better at that than I ever was. Asterisk asterisk. Ethan. I folded the letter slowly and placed it inside a drawer. Not out of fear, not out of pain, but because I knew that's where it belonged now. In the past. Like a finished book you no longer reread but never throw away. Later that night, after Miles had fallen asleep in a heap of birthday stickers and superhero socks, I stood at his doorway, watching him breathe. And I let the silence tell me what I had known for a while but hadn't yet accepted. This was my life now. Not as a woman in recovery. Not as a survivor recounting her pain. But as a builder. Protector. A narrator of the life I chose every day to create. Not despite the storm but because of it. When I turned off the lights and crawled into bed, I didn't replay Ethan's words. I didn't revisit courtrooms or folders or custody motions. Thought about Miles. And how one day he would ask me the full story. And I would tell it. Not to burden him, but to show him that strength doesn't come from having all the answers. Comes from asking the right questions. Comes from saying no. It comes from walking through fire and learning how to carry the flame, not the burn. And when he asks how we made it through, I will say, we did not survive because we were lucky. We survived because we refused to vanish. And because I finally remembered the most important truth of all. I was never powerless. I was just waiting to rise.